able to express, show me kindness in this group, that you will show them kindness in return, immensely, abundantly, above what they can ever imagine. Lord, as we begin again this evening, please inspire us from above, that your words will come forth mightily, and our hearts will be quickened by the entrance of your words in preparation for eternity. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. And so we stopped last week at the point where there was going to be a disappointment. The mouth, the belly becoming bitter. The belly becoming bitter. The message was to be sweet in the mouth and bitter in the belly. And that is chapter 10, verse 10. And so we were able to discover that historically, now, we are not speculating. We are giving a prophetic anchor to this whole issue. And that is why it is important we get this right. If you can get this point right, then you will discover that God at this point began a movement that will counteract all of the activities of the age of reason and all of the dark ages. Began a special movement to gather. So the gathering started about this time. Satan started gathering, and God too started gathering since this time. And so this is an important part or an important point in the book of Revelation that we need to understand. And so historically, we proved it last week that around the 19th century, there was a general reawakening in the world. The Spirit of God moved so mightily across the world that people started rediscovering truths that were hidden. Before then, let's go back a little before then to history and see that the Reformation of Martin Luther around the Church of Sardis, that was around the 16th century. The Reformation of Luther struck a major blow to the papacy. And it was God's plan that the Reformation will continue to the end of time. It was not to stop. But once again, the devil truncated the Reformation. And that led to splinter groups here and there. Splinter groups. We had people who broke out, the Methodists, we had the Presbyterians, we had the Anglicans, we had the Anabaptists, we had the so many groups broke out in the Reformation. The Lutherans, the Calvinists, and all of these groups, they broke out from the Reformation. And as soon as they broke out, they took with them a part of the mother harlot, which was Sunday worship. And that was a major breakout. Though they had broken out, but they had not come to the full realization of the truth. Because remember that the third church, fourth church, especially the fourth church of Thyatira, error was instituted in the church and state meshed together, and it was error became an institution. And so it was not too easy for the reformers to just come out and understand all the truth. So God actually started a plan in the Reformation to lead them into all truth. But unfortunately, it was truncated, like I said, and the devil hijacked it, as we had splinter groups here and there that fenced themselves and the doctrines they had found, which the doctrines were just a subset of the general doctrines that God was actually leading his people into. And so let's race back now to the 19th century. By the end of the Reformation, God decided to do something again. By the end of the Dark Ages, by the time of the end, God decided to do something again that would gather his people into one. God did not want his people to be scattered. He wanted to gather them again into one. And that's important we know. Right from when the Lamb ascended, we see the intention of God. In Revelation chapter 5, verse 9, you see that the intention of God is actually to gather people from every tribe, every tongue, every people, and every nation. Mark that. God's intention is to gather people. And so God's kingdom is not tribalistic. God's kingdom is not nationalistic. And that is where the idea of literal Israel today fades into extinction. Because God's kingdom is not tribalistic. Neither is it nationalistic. God's kingdom is composed of every tribe, every tongue, every people, and every nation. And that was God's plan, actually. So God didn't want a separate or deep splinter groups here and there. And so around this 19th century, this was a prophetic declaration that came to pass. The little book, as the people were gaining, attention was being drawn to the little book. We have discovered the little book being Daniel, the part that concerned the time of the end, the sanctuary, 2,300 days. And people were studying. And we have seen that people that were even studying, take note, these people were cut across board. Some of them were Catholics, some of them were Presbyterians, some of them were Baptists, some of them were Methodists that began studying. So take note, by this time we are referring to in the 19th century, these people, God moved upon their hearts and their attention was drawn back to the Bible. And so in the New Worlds, remember, people fled from Europe to the New Worlds. In fact, in 1625 or so, the Pilgrims fled Europe and came to the New Worlds in the Mayflower. That was the name of the boat. The name of the boat, 1625, I think, where the Pilgrim Fathers left the shores of Europe and landed in the shores of the New World, that is presently called America today. So America became the land of the free, the land of the brave. People fleeing persecution in Europe would flee to America to gain freedom. And so you will see there that okay, thank you. Osato is just proving all of these things from. Thank you very much for that. And so you will see that William Miller, I'm trying to give us an insight into why attention was drawn to the New Worlds, America, because the ground shifted. Europe, the New Worlds, America became the new place for religion, because people fled Europe. All of the Puritans and the rest of them, they fled Europe, coming to the New World to seek freedom to express their religion without being made in institution of the state. So there is separation of church and state, civil and religion. And so basically, that is why we see the attention, even if it was God was moving people in different places of the earth studying, and the attention was being drawn to an event that was to happen at the end of the 2,300 days. That was the attention that was being drawn to. God was moving their hearts in Germany, in China, in Mexico, in Chile, all around the world. God was moving their hearts. And so William Miller, who was in New Hampshire, in in the US also was moved. I've given us a short background or history of William Miller, who was influenced by deism, the age of reason, and all of those things. There was no God and the rest. But in 2 years, 1816 to 1818, he studied the Bible. And he told himself, what even gave him the conviction that made him change from deism to believe God was the fact that he went to one of the wars, and while all his friends died, he was miraculously saved. And so, being miraculously saved, he decided now to take God seriously, with remembering his Baptist background. And why all of these historical details? It is because we need to know that the Bible gave this prophetic information. And so we are not mistaken. We have a more sure word of prophecy. We are not mistaken at all. That's why I'm trying to give us this historical background to make us get it rightly. And so, from 1816, Luther said he was going to study the Bible verse by verse. He would move no further than he had understood one verse at a time. And he made the Bible, in fact, the foundation of sola scriptura that was started in the Reformation by Martin Luther became Miller's watchword. The Bible and the Bible alone was going to explain itself. And Miller started. 2 years it took him to complete the Bible. And what even gave him more issues was the fact that when he got to Daniel 8:14, Daniel 8:14 was a hard nut to crack. William Miller at that point saw something, and he got to a very strong conclusion in 1818 at the end of his studies that something spectacular was about to happen at the end of the 2,300 days. And for Luther, what am I calling Luther now? Sorry, for William Miller, see now, Luther did something for the Reformation, and Miller now is doing something also that can be called Reformation, because the world had sunken into deism, into secularism. At this point in time, secularism, the smoke from the pit had darkened the sun, remember. So God needed to restore things. God needed to place things in the right perspective. And so that's why I keep calling Luther. Please pardon me, you are looking at Miller. And so when Miller got to Daniel 8:14, we know that, studied before, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And that was how, from studies here and there, Old Testament, the typical Day of Atonement here and there, Miller discovered that Christ was going to come back to earth in 1843. 1843. That was his discovery, because what now gave him that wrong assertion that Christ was going to return to earth was the fact that he consulted the Bible concordance of his time. Now follow this trigger. That's why I keep saying we are studying the Bible. The Bible can interpret itself if we are patient enough. He consulted the concordance of his time, and the concordance of his time, there he saw that the earth is the sanctuary. The earth is the sanctuary. And so he concluded, if the earth is the sanctuary, and he says the sanctuary will be cleansed, what can cleanse the earth? Now look at where he got it wrong. What can cleanse the earth if not fire? Because the earth now cannot be cleansed with water anymore. It will be cleansed with fire. And so that was how he concluded that the earth being the sanctuary, Christ was returning at the end of the 2,300 days, which he placed at 1842, 1843, to cleanse the earth with fire, which is the sanctuary, according to him. Now, Miller was an astute Bible student, applying a day for a year principle. You know, some of the foundations today we use for biblical studies, they were set by William Miller. William Miller, seriously speaking. He did a good job. But you see, remember we said in the Church of Philadelphia, God was going to open a door and shut a door, and was going to bring a test upon the whole world. And so one can say God was involved in this. God was about to gather. And like I keep saying, for every significant event that would affect salvation in the world, God would give an announcement ahead of time. Before the world was destroyed in the flood, 120 years before, God announced. Before Sodom and Gomorrah were and the cities, Sodom, Gomorrah, 5 cities of the plain, Admon, 5 cities of the plain, Bela, Sodom, Gomorrah, 5 cities of the plain. Before they were destroyed, God had to also visit them and see. He had time to fill their cup. Before Egypt was sacked in the Red Sea, God gave them time. So God would always give an announcement ahead of time to prepare the world for any major event in salvation story. And that was what Miller was about to announce at this time. And so in 1818, when he got that conviction from his studies, he felt he wasn't going to say this. How was he going to say this to his friends who were secularists, who were the deists, his friends who didn't believe in anything God, let alone saying now that Christ was coming back to the earth? That didn't make sense to him. And so from 1818, he kept quiet. He kept quiet until 1831 or thereabout. 1831. In fact, he said he wasn't going to speak. He gave God a sign. He said if God wanted him to speak, God should give him an invite. God should give him a platform to speak this way. And truly, from his in-law, the pastor that was to preach that Sunday didn't come to church, and he got that invite. As soon as he had finished praying, in less than 3 hours, he got that invite. And in 1831, Miller preached for the first time. A 50-year-old man preached for the first time about his conviction that Christ was going to come 1843. It was shocking to the world. It was shocking. It was a bombshell. Wow, Christ is coming. It was in fact, it was sweet in the mouth. It was really sweet. If you go and study the history, you see people began to give up certain things. Habits were changing. People were preparing for Christ's coming. It was a sweet message. He's coming. Christ is coming. Christ is coming. They were moving around. Camp meetings here and there. Everybody was this. So they were called Millerites. People were excommunicated. People were leaving mainstream churches to join the Millerite movement. When I mean mainstream churches that have sunken into formalism, Methodist Church, Presbyterian Church, people were leaving those churches to join the Millerites. So it was called Millerite because it was spearheaded by William Miller. Other persons joined him, like Joseph V. Himes, S.S. Snow. These are all names that we can find in history. Interesting names and interesting figures. It was so interesting that people were being baptized every day. Every day they were joining. So from 1843, studies were done again. The 0-year principle, remember we did that. Moving from BC to AD, there's a 0 year that is lost. The 0 year that is lost. And so it was someone called Samuel Sheffield Snow, S.S. Snow, that discovered that as they were studying more and more and more in preparation, giving the announcement. Finally the date was fixed. The 10th day of the 7th month, in using the calendar of that time, was going to be October 22, 1844. The 10th day of the 7th month was going to be October, using the 0 year principle now as propounded by S.S. Snow. We now see that it became 1844, October 22, October being the 7th month, and 22 being the 10th day of the 7th month that year, using the Jewish calendar. And so the news now was Christ was going to come October 22, 1844. Wow. This was so remarkable. People sold their properties. People were ready to give up habits. Lives were changing. People were, it's a whole lot. It was really sweet in the mouth. It was sweet in the mouth. Unfortunately, let's fast forward quickly. October 22 came and Christ did not come. In fact, it is called the Great Disappointment in history. It's not even, it was terrible. Some people committed suicide. Some people died of depression. It was terrible. It's not something, when you read the history books and you see, I wonder if I were there, the way I'm speaking with all conviction now, because they set a date. And that's why we are careful to learn from the past. Christ has not told anyone the date or the day or the time he will come. He has not told anyone. He has not revealed that. And that is why we learn from the past, so that we won't repeat the mistakes of the past. Now, William Miller did a good job. The prophecy calculation correct, but the event was correct. Calculation. But, okay, let me say this again. What he said was going to happen on that day, the event was wrong. But the calculations and all of the principles were correct. And so, that day came, Christ did not come back to earth. It was terrible, like I said earlier. And no wonder the angel said, this book, when you eat it, when you begin to study it, when you begin to understand it, it will be sweet in the mouth. But when it gets to the stomach, it will be bitter. It was bitter indeed. It was bitter indeed. And how bitter this experience was. And so, the very next day, 23rd, people went back, people began to desert the Millerite movement. Remember, they had been excommunicated from their churches, disfellowship from their churches. They had sold their properties. They had given up everything. In fact, some of their friends had ridiculed them. So many things came up, so many theories around that time that they sold white robe and the rest were not really true. But people ridiculed them greatly. Say, heaven people, when we go to heaven and leave us here on earth. You can imagine now, the next day they still saw them and, are you still on earth? Why have you not gone to heaven? You can imagine the kind of ridicule they must have faced. Well, and so people went back. In fact, people went back to their lifestyle. People deserted God. But the truth of the matter is that a few remained. A few remained, less than. Revelation 10, verse 11. Now what? Let's read that thing. Let's read that. Revelation 10, verse 11. Revelation 10, verse 11. I want to read, and that's the last verse in chapter 10. And he said to me, that same voice that he had heard, instructing him vicariously in this vision. He said to him, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. Now follow. Prophesy again suggests that there was a prophecy before. And that also suggests that the prophecy before failed. And there was going to be a need to prophesy again. The prophecy before was to every people, nation, tongue, and that was the gathering. But it failed because when it got to the stomach, it became bitter. And people, God used that to test people, to test the sincerity of people. And when it failed, there was a need to prophesy again. And so people that remain, the few that remain, less than 50, they said, what must have happened? God cannot be wrong. What must have happened? And that again gave way to very serious studies, studies and revelations, and finally they saw that what actually happened was not connected to the earth per se. It was not about Christ returning to the earth, but it was about the antitypical sanctuary in heaven where Christ was about to begin the last phase of ministration that we popularly call the investigative judgment, but actually called the pre-advent judgment. So Christ was about to begin the pre-advent judgment at that year, at that point in time. And so there was going to be an announcement, and that was what they finally discovered. I said, wow, this is the secret. And so what can we do now? And that was why in the church of Philadelphia, God said he was going to shut a door and open a door. He was shutting a door and opening another door. And the door that was open led to the church of Laodicea, a people being judged. It was time for judgment. It was time, and that was what the Millerites missed. But the few that remained, after much study, discovered this. Now, let me shock us. Before this time, the world was worshiping on Sunday, before 1844. So these few that remained, and they were still studying, they were still worshiping on Sunday. They were still worshiping on Sunday. But in the year 1846, interesting history I'm giving us now. It became clear through tracts, printed page materials. A tract got from Rachel Oakes, it got to Joseph Bates. Rachel Oakes got the tract from T.M. Preble, who was a Baptist, an Anabaptist, shared it, and Joseph Bates got it, and Joseph Bates accepted. It was the tract on the Sabbath. He accepted because now he was among the few that remained in the Millerites. The Millerites had been dissolved, but the few remained. Joseph Bates was part of the few. So he got it. Captain Joseph Bates, he was a captain, a retired captain who put all his life savings pension into this Millerite movement, proclaiming that Christ would come again. And so he didn't give up, he joined the few. And so he got the Sabbath message that truly the day of worship is not Sunday. God did not come from heaven tell him, he studied it, reading a tract that was given to him. And he, Joseph Bates, shared this idea to Ellen White and James White. Two of them, Ellen White and James White, got married August 1846 and began to keep the Sabbath that same year because they got the message from Joseph Bates. I'm giving us history of Joseph Bates. So they began to keep the Sabbath in 1846. And so that was studies. Some of these truths now that were buried. Joseph Bates, even before he joined the Millerite movement, was a strong advocate of health. So he was a very strong advocate of health. No caffeine, no alcohol, meat eating. This was his niche for him. And so joining the Millerite movement, he also began to propound all of these things, telling them that our health matters to God. God is concerned about our health, and as he cleanses the sanctuary, he also wants our health, our body as his temple to be cleansed. And all of these things. So after the Millerite movement disbanded, the few that remained began to study again, to collect all of these truths that they had not known. They began to gather them together, assemble them together, just as God had planned. And the prophecy is, you must prophesy again. So the first one that failed, you must prophesy again. And so no wonder this little one that remained continued studying, and that little flock that remained finally decided to have a name, because they began to have property here and there, and they needed to register the properties. So they decided to get a name. And in 1860, In 1860, the little flock, they were growing gradually. They met and decided to ask for a name. Suggestions came here and there, but finally the name Seventh-day Adventist was chosen. And that name was chosen October 1st, 1860, after several studies. My people are not giving us history compressed. If you don't study it, it will take you a whole lot, you know. After several studies, biblical studies here and there, the name was chosen Seventh-day Adventist, October 1st, 1860. And let me give us one fact I found out. So please, type, when was the book Origin of Species published? Let's get this now. Let's see. I found out this fact and I saw, wow, God does not make mistakes. Though he did not say it, but the timing of God is perfect. The book Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. Origin of Species. Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. Where was it published? Let's see. Okay. Beautiful. 1859. So you see, you know, when the devil is doing something, God is laughing. God just laughs. And so why evolution was being propounded already by 1859, God was raising a movement that will debunk evolution with the doctrine of creation. Creation debunks evolution. And so I wrote an article one time, A Tale of Two Dates. A tale of, maybe later I will share it on the group, A Tale of Two Dates. I was just contemplating, reasoning how God works. It's not coincidental that The Origin of Species was published November 24, 1859, and a movement named Seventh-day Adventist Church was established, was formally named October 1st, 1860. This is a parallel battle. Evolution versus creation. Worship of God versus worship of man. Obedience versus disobedience. And it matters greatly whose side you are on. Seriously speaking, there is no gainsaying to say, I'm on the fence. No fence in this matter. There's no fence. It's either you are on one side or you are not on the other side. And so basically, the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1860 has been growing and remains a church that has its, my people, but with all sense of responsibility too. Because the message is, you must prophesy again to many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. So it behooves every child of God that accepts this message to prophesy again. And that is why you see the message of Revelation chapter 14, you see the message going forth with loud voice. Angelos, the messenger, shouting with a loud voice, fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. You know, do not worship the beast, do not receive the mark of the beast, and Babylon is falling, come out of Babylon, do not partake of the crimes of Babylon, the sins of Babylon. So basically, God says, one of the ways to, as we continue in our study, we will understand that truly the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a prophetic anchor, has a prophetic message. And that message is one that will prepare the world for harvest. Seriously speaking, the message being preached will prepare the world for harvest. And that is God's plan to save the world. So if the devil is gathering since the 19th century, and God too certainly will be gathering, The devil gathers with lies, with deception, with signs and lying wonders. But God, the only thing God uses to gather is the truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. It's the truth. God never uses the weapons of Satan. God can never lie. God can never coerce. God can never deceive. God uses love. God uses love to attract us to himself. He said, and this is life eternal, that they may know thee, the only true God. That's John 17, verse 3. And Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. And so it's important we accept this message with all sense of urgency, and then share it with all sense of responsibility. Because getting to know it and holding it is tantamount to sin in itself. Because the message is you must prophesy again. And that is why every Seventh-day Adventist that is not missionary in nature, that has not allowed this truth to sanctify his life or her life, let alone preaching it, is treading on dangerous grounds. It is not enough to say the membership of the church does not qualify you automatically for heaven. Never. It does not. Instead, it puts you on very dangerous ground. Dangerous ground in the sense that having known the truth, you are responsible for sounding the trumpet to others. And that means too, to whom much is given, much is expected. If you have known this truth and you are not living by the truth, you are treading on very dangerous ground. And that's it. That's, for me, that is a sober reflection. It calls for attention, seriously, because even I, preaching and lecturing and shouting all of these things, I'm even putting myself on more dangerous grounds. Because being a teacher of these things, and if I don't do them, woe unto me. It's as serious as that. And that is why, having heard, it's not enough to just pray, make us doers. It is intentionally to be practiced, intentionally to be done. And so we are done with chapter 10. And that is why you notice chapter 10 and 11, 1 to 14, chronicle the sixth trumpet. So in the time of the sixth trumpet, in chapter 10, God is gathering. In chapter 11, Satan is gathering. And chapter 11 talks about, like we have said, I will not waste time there. Chapter 11 talks about what happened in the French Revolution and all of this. We have seen that before when we were looking at the fifth trumpet. So chapter 11 talks more about what happened in the French Revolution. And just the opposite, you see, there are two gatherings under the sixth trumpet. Chapter 10, God is gathering. Chapter 11, Satan is gathering. And I've told us the style of gathering. God can never use lies to gather. So, but the devil has several options. If you are not secular, then you may be churchy, but not spiritual. He has several options for everybody. So that you will not just say, go to church, don't worry, go to church, have your name in the church record, but don't obey God. Don't be spiritual. Cheat your neighbor and go ahead. Business is business. Don't bring God into business. These are all Satan's lies. God wants to sanctify our life wholly because we are being judged. Our words, our thoughts, our actions, everything is being judged. And it is important we know that the judge is our friend. So if it's our friend, there's no need to fear. There's no need to fear. So I'll stop here so that we can have time for discussion. I know it will really come up. So that by Wednesday, by God's grace, we will continue from the seventh trumpet, chapter 11, verse 15. Thank you so much. God bless us.
Okay, thank you so much, my pastor. So, God bless you. All right, Mr. Adeshewa, I don't know if you can hear me. Please, you should handle the section.
Good evening, sir. Thank you, Pastor Emmanuel, for that thorough history study. Does anyone have questions, contribution, confusion? Does anyone have anything to say to what has been? Okay, Christian.
Good evening, everyone. Pastor, thank you so much for today's lesson. I have a question. Now, the great disappointment is quite a peculiar event, and I understand how it also fits into what we are learning. But my question is this: there are so many other events that have happened in Christian society that could also be termed as a disappointing one, where people were expecting certain things and had their hopes dashed. Right? How does this particular one stand out to be the fulfillment of the Revelation prophecy among the host of other events? I think even the Jehovah's Witness, I think they have their own disappointing stuff where they also predicted certain things and certain things will not come to pass. So how are we sure that this is the one that quite aligns with the fulfillment of the Revelation prophecy about a sweet bitter experience?
Okay. I was expecting this question. Thank you very much for asking. Once again, we proved that in our previous study. The timing is so unique that you cannot mistake it. From Daniel down to Revelation, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And so it's a climatic event. Towards the end of the 2,300 days, the Bible tells us, and even to prove that point, it says, look at the French Revolution, you see, as the two witnesses were ending their witnessing, the beast that came from the bottomless pit came up in a city spiritually called Egypt and Sodom, where Christ was crucified. So the language and the timing point specifically to something around that time. And when you check history, you cannot mistake it. There's nothing, no two things happened around that time. Now let me give us another shocker. Most of the denominations we see today all came around this time. Let me just give, for example, the Mormons, Joseph Smith, the Mormons, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, came around 1842 thereabouts. Around the same time of the spiritual reawakening I'm talking about that happened, that shook the world. The Jehovah's Witnesses came much later. They were part of the Millerite movement when they broke. When the Millerite movement broke, several groups came up. Several groups continued with their date setting and the rest. The Watchtowers, they are part of those groups that came up with their date setting. Several other groups, the evangelicals came up, there are several things that happened. So this event is one in the history of the world around this time. And so you cannot mistake it for any other thing, especially when you look at the prophecy and how. So if we say the 2,300 prophecy from the Bible was fulfilled in 1844, meaning events that will take place around this time certainly will prepare the world for the fulfillment of 1844. That is one major fact to prove that what we are saying is correct. There are others, but let me stop there.
Thank you. For Christian, as your question be answered.
Yes, yes, yes. So what it's saying is that it's not just a singular event. There are other connected events that were actually fulfilled. Yeah, and it also makes sense because the event aligns with the messages from the churches, I guess, and also aligns with other parts of the seals and everything that we've been reading. So yes, it makes sense.
Mr. Jeremiah, the floor is yours. Okay, good evening, everyone. My question is, Pastor said we all know, okay, God does not lie and God does not use falsehood to draw people to Him. But it gets quite confusing about the prophecy. If the in the Bible they were asked to prophesy, he was asked to prophesy again. But before that, the confusion that started that led to all this movement, was it God allowing it or was it from the devil? Because the confusion drew people to Christ and at the same time it drew people away from Christ. So was the prophecy, I don't know that did become a question. The confusion, what was that about? Like, why did God allow it to be like that? Was God trying to use our confusion to draw us, or vice versa? And my second question is, from what Brother Christian asked about how we know that this is authentic, I like the question because if you check most religious groups, they all have different history. At some point, when I was studying this or watching a video about this history, I got confused at some point because each different people and different views about what it's about. Some will say this, some will put it this way, because I've literally heard different parts of these histories. So sometimes you get confused which one is the original. And all these groups that had different histories from their churches and all that, how can we convince them that, okay, this is the original, what they have is not really true? And also, when the great disappointment happened, was it all Christians around the world? That means the CAC, then the Anglicans, Catholics, and the rest. Was it all the Christians around the world that fell for it, or how was it like?
Okay, I believe I'm taking it from this perspective. I decided to take it from this very strong perspective because I looked at my group, I looked at my audience, and primarily all Seventh-day Adventists. And that is why I hit it hard like this. If I had seen my audience to be not like this, certainly I would have approached this topic from another perspective. Not to water down the truth, but to make it as presentable and acceptable as possible. Unfortunately, the truth will still do its work. My work is not to actually make or convince anybody. That's the beauty about the truth. The truth does not need adverts. The truth does not need adverts. It speak the truth, say it, and let the Holy Spirit do His work. So we are not out to fight or convince anybody against their wish. You know, God has a way of doing His things, especially when you have blown the alarm. So say prophesy again, preach again, let them know again, and let it go forth. And when it goes forth, there may be several options. The devil has made it so confusing that there are several options very close to the original, but it is not the original. Several options. And the devil has made it so that people will become confused. But I still tell you, among this confusion, sincere seekers of truth are being led to know the truth amid the confusion. It's unfortunate that majority will be lost, as we saw in the gathering, in the number that was heard in the sixth trumpet, as compared to the sealing under the sixth seal. It's unfortunate that many will be lost. But don't worry, don't lose hope. You are not here to convince anybody. It's first of all, you have to save yourself. Rahab saved herself first by tying a scarlet cord. She saved herself. So first of all, settle into this truth spiritually and intellectually. Save yourself. Be very sure of your footing before you even think of trying to convince anybody or trying to even tell anybody. Save your own self. Be sure. And then, having done that, that's why this group is existing, to help us see these things again, to investigate them, to be very sure that what we believe is not error but the truth. Now, asking whether God was the one that used confusion and the rest. You see, like I told you, William Miller had a background, and sometimes God works through human vessels, and that's why today people keep saying the Bible is not correct, the Bible is not correct, the Bible is not correct, because God did not dictate the Bible from heaven. God did not dictate and men started to write. Instead, God inspired their thoughts, so we believe in thought inspiration, and they wrote in human language that is imperfect, human language that is corrupted. God allowed his words to be written in human language, and it is the human language that is causing problems. You say this is not the original Hebrew, this is not the original Greek. Yet, through it all, God still speaks to sincere minds who do not even know original language. God still speaks to them. If you are sincere and you want to know the truth and be led by the Spirit, God still speaks. So now, will you say God is responsible for the problem that today we have in the Bible? One Bible, but different in interpretations. Would you say God is responsible? The answer is no. It's just that God has put himself at risk. God took a very big risk for creating man and giving him free will. Big risk. And God is a risk taker, but calculated risk. Because creating man with free will presupposes that man can decide against him. And that's what we see today. Man deciding against God and nothing is happening. Eventually, God will seal man's decision. And so for William Miller too, he had a background, he had all of these things, and God was walking through it all. He said, my counsel must stand. If you remember, God used Babylon to conquer Jerusalem. But Babylon too was conquered by Medo-Persia. So was God, through it all, God's counsel must stand. So William Miller was doing his own human effort in the counsel of God's plan. And what he did prepared the way, because Proverbs chapter 4, I love this text so much. Read 4 verse 18, would say, the path of the just shines brighter and brighter unto the perfect day. So God does not reveal truth all at once. He leads us gradually into the truth. And that's why we keep studying. And as he leads us gradually, we come into the knowledge of the truth and we accept. So I don't think I've answered your question, but I've also helped to shed light on the question. If anybody has any other answer, good and fine.
Yes, Sister Tatu.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that God also makes every situation to turn out good for the people that love him and for the people that trust in him. I don't think that God purposely wanted it to go that way, but at the end of the day, God has given us free will, so we are going to choose which way we want to go. So maybe when he chose that path, God said, okay, I'm still going to try and make this work out how I want it to work out. So to just add.
Okay, so I have a question before I start calling names. My question is, or a clarification rather, and then a question. So the investigative judgment means that Christ is currently in the most holy place and is judging our every action and thoughts and deed. I just want to get that clear. Like, we are being, on a daily basis, we are being investigated or judged, right?
Well, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. You know why I answer yes is looking at the typical sanctuary. We did this in Daniel. The high priest would go into the most holy place once a year to go and cleanse the people of their sin. So what we actually call judgment, let us not see judgment from a negative perspective. You know, when we say judgment, our mind flies to negativity. Judgment is for vindication. Judgment is to ascertain who is right and who is wrong. And so if there's a great controversy, there's a need for judgment to ascertain who is right and who is wrong. And so you are right by saying that Christ began the final phase. Remember that the final phase, because once the high priest leaves the most holy place, the next thing is to put the sin on Azazel. We did this in the book of Daniel. And then send the scapegoat to the wilderness, pronounces blessing on his people, is waiting people in the outer court, you know. And we did this in the book of Daniel. So the same thing is coming up now in Revelation. Christ is presently concluding his work in the sanctuary. Anytime from now, as we have seen, he's coming out. Once he comes out, and that's why we see by the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven. We also see again that by the seventh trumpet, there will be the kingdom of this world will become the kingdom of Christ, and it will reign forever. So we are living now in the period of the sixth seal and the sixth trumpet. And that is why it's a critical period where our lives are being investigated. But don't allow the idea of being investigated or being judged scare you, because judgment should be a thing of joy, not a thing of fear or sadness.
Thank you, sir, for the clarity. So my question is, what about those people that are believers and they love God dearly, they probably have like personal encounter with Christ, you hear them some of their testimonies, you see that maybe they have like a very strong relationship with God, like God speaks to them and all that, but like they worship on Sundays, they don't even know about the Sabbath, or maybe they know but they don't believe in it or whatever. What's going to happen?
Well, final judgment is for God. God has not called us to condemn. He has only called us to prophesy again and make it open to every people, nation, tongues, tribe. Make it open. Open door policy. As to whoever claims to be led by God, the Bible says, by their fruit you shall know them. But it did not say, by their fruit you shall condemn them. Knowing them is for your own safety, so that you will know how to behave or how to relate, and for your own safety. And then, we do not serve God only based on feelings. Experiences have a place, but we do not serve God entirely based on experiences. Because experiences, the devil can give an experience. The devil can make a feeling happen. You know, so if our faith is based on only experience, feelings, and personal encounters without the Bible and a thus says the Lord, those encounters and feelings, for me, because the Bible has said I should test all spirits. If I test it, for me, those encounters are questionable, especially when they are leading me again away from a thus said the Lord. So I don't have much